Well, hello, y'all. Happy Sunday. It is wonderful to be here with you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is where you happen to be watching this stream. I know it is good. As I've been saying today, I am full of the feeling of healing. I am full of the feeling of joy. I am full of the feeling of good, for my good is my God. And I want to get into today's sermon because we have something powerful to share with each and every one of you. And of course, as we always do, I would love for you to join me in this centering prayer as we prepare to receive this wisdom. Please repeat after me. I welcome the spirit of truth into my mind and let it grow in my heart. Thank you, God, in, through, and as me. Amen. Ashe. And so it is. And so it is. And so we are in part 2 of the Miracle Minded series, a 3-part series. And this month we have looked at first the 5th condition, giving. And that sermon was giving should always feel good. Then we went to the 6th condition, which is grounding. Sit down somewhere was the message. Last week, the 7th condition, visualizing, see something better. And we talked about the power of what visualizing really is. And what we read very simply in English is looked up to heaven. There's so much that's encoded in that when we start to peel back the layers of the original words that were used in Greek. And we understand that looking up is a rising up in elevation to the place of power, of happiness, and actually seeing again. What I shared with you, that word anablepo, is a Greek word that is also used throughout the Gospels when the blind received sight, when the miracle happens. That's the same word that was used. So that looked up is not just about looking up to God or looking up to the heavens, but it is really about rising up in our own consciousness, in our own mind, to see again or to receive sight, to view life from the vantage point of consciousness where all is good, where all is well, and from where everything indeed comes into being. And so that is then what we must do as we are bringing forth any miracle. And by the way, a miracle is just a shift in perception. So whatever it is that you're desiring to experience in your life, to be, do, or have, right? It may be a dream, it may be a goal, it may be a plan, it may be an urgent situation. That is always what's necessary. And at the outset, I want to say this. There was a question that was shared in the CSC Live group, and I don't want to get in the specifics of that question or even answer that question directly. But what it reminded me of is something that I want to bring back to your attention right here and right now. As we have been moving through this series, right? So part 1 of last month, right? We went through the first 4 conditions. And this month in part 2, we've moved through another 3. And today we will talk about the 8th condition. This series is not designed for you to wait to get all 12 and then figure out how to practice it, right? What you have actually been hearing and studying, and I trust taking notes on and listening again, is designed for you to apply now. And one of the things that I think is incredibly important when we think about that first condition of emptiness, spirit abhors a vacuum, was the sermon, is in looking at the scripture, that was Jesus's response to receiving devastating news. His very, very close friend and first cousin was killed and beheaded, and he got the information late after they had already buried him. And the response was then to practice the condition of emptiness. So first and foremost, whatever is happening in your life, and when you start to feel discord or discomfort, or you may experience something out in your life or in the world that is unwanted and you dislike, practice the first condition, emptiness, and then move through the other conditions, right? But I think this is very important. I want to remind you all that this is a series that's not designed to learn the steps like it's hierarchical and then start to apply them. Each and every week, you can tap into any one of these conditions as a response to whatever is taking place in your life right here and right now. So as we move into the 8th condition, I want to take you to something that we haven't touched on or discussed and may seem like a tangent, but I want to take you to the book of Genesis, right? The first book in the collection of texts called the Bible in the First Testament, right? Now, Genesis 1 is the first creation story. For those that don't know, there are actually 2 creation stories in the Bible. Genesis 1 is the first creation story. Genesis 2 is the second creation story. Unfortunately, those two creation stories have been morphed and merged in the ways in which modern humans tend to recount those stories. And so we think that the first creation story is the beginning and the second creation story is a continuation of it. They're two totally different stories, right? From two totally different points in history and time. And so this first creation story, there's something powerful that we read, because you all know the first creation story. It's the 7-day creation, right? And you know that in the 7-day creation, God said, let there be. And then the text says, and it was so. And then this text says, and God saw it was good, right? Let there be light. Right? Let there be waters upon the firmament, right? Let there be the animals and creeping things, right? And so we all know that formula because everyone, almost regardless of whatever spiritual tradition you grew up in or were raised in, you have a sense of that 7-day creation. God said, let there be. The text says, and it was so. And then the text says, and God saw it was good. Now, while this is familiar, this 7-day creation story has been read, retold, and recited for so long from a place of powerlessness. And part of the reason that it has been read and told and retold from a place of powerlessness is because it has been read literally. But actually, this 7-day creation, this account, it is a metaphorical and symbolic account of creation. One of the two creation stories found in Genesis. But that's not really where the powerlessness comes in. It is read, I say, from a place of powerlessness because it is powerlessness that is exemplified when one does not realize that this is a principle being taught, not instead of, as most people read it, as demonstrating how God operates. I want you to hear that again. It is a point of powerlessness to read this as a story about how God or source created versus recognizing that what is being taught is a principle. And what are those three pieces? I want to read it again. Let there be, and it was so, and God saw it was good. Now, this principle that we find in Genesis 1 in the first creation story that we read over and over again across the 7 days of creation is exactly what the 8th condition of gratitude is teaching us. Now, I know right now, some of you may be a little confused. You may be thinking, wait, hold up, PG. What in the world does this have to do about gratitude? I didn't see a thank you or appreciation or congratulations or any kind of praise. And there was no praising of God in what you read. And I've never read anything like that in Genesis 1 in the past. How could this have anything to do with the 8th condition of gratitude? And if you are asking that, if you are a little bit concerned in this moment, then today I will disrupt your current understanding of gratitude and provide a new perspective that gives you power. Because as I said, the misuse and misreading of that text leads to powerlessness. Affirmation time. There is a blessing in my blessing. Once again, there is a blessing in my blessing. And for a third time, there is a blessing in my blessing. So let's look at this principle in Genesis 1, and then we're going to connect it to what we've been talking about in this miracle story in the Alpha passage of the fish and loaves. Again, the formula, let there be, and it was so, and God saw it was good. There is a formula here. There is a principle being demonstrated. When we hold an idea in mind, we are saying, let there be. When we think a thought, we are saying, let there be. All that exists was first held where? In mind. And that idea in mind is immediately. Think of a mansion, and so it is. Think of the car you want to drive, and so it is. Think of a trip you want to take, and so it is. Think of an amount of money you want to demonstrate, and so it is. All that exists was first held in mind, and that idea in mind is because it exists in your mind. Nothing can demonstrate, nothing can manifest except it is first held in mind. And so that's what this first thing represents. Let there be. But then we have the last part, and God saw it was good. Now, this seems to suggest that what God created reflected its good or goodness back to God. When we read that, it always sounds like, and I know this is the way I heard it, particularly as a child, that God said, let there be light, and it was so, right? And God saw the light and saw it was good. And so it sounds like God is admiring God's work in the same way that a painter would step back from the canvas when she is done and admire her creation and see that it is good. But that is not what's being demonstrated. God saw it was good. Now, where did I say, where does the let there be happen? Let there be. Think of a mansion. And so it is. But where is the mansion? I said, think of the car you want to drive. And so it is. But where is that car and where are you driving it? I said, think of a trip that you want to take. And so it is. But where is that trip that you want to take? Think of an amount of money you want to demonstrate. And so it is. But where is that amount of money? It is in mind. It is in consciousness. So this is a movement in mind. Whatever we think or create in mind, we must call and see it good. We must bless it. And so the idea of, and God saw it was good, God was actually conferring goodness upon it. He was naming it good. It wasn't saying I'm good and reflecting it back in the way that a painter would see a finished work and admire it. God wasn't admiring its work. God was blessing God's work. Affirmation time. There is a blessing in my blessing. Again, there is a blessing in my blessing. For a third time, there is a blessing in my blessing. Whatever we think or create in mind, we must call and see it good. We must bless it. And this then is the essence of what gratitude truly is. So now let's connect this back to the Alpha passage. For those that are just joining us for the very first time, the Alpha passage here is Matthew 14, the story of the infamous story of the fish and loaves. The first account, which is the feeding of the 5,000 plus women and children. There's another account, separate miracle story where Jesus feeds 4,000 plus women and children. And we've just been dealing with verse 19. The first and second parts, A and B of verse 19. And I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version. Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass, right? And we know that this is the grounding principle. And what that symbolizes is getting present, right? I know I am prepared for my miracle when I am present, right? So we must get present. We must be fully in the present moment, right? And focus solely on the light of source within us. Once we get present, then we take an action step. And so then that's part B of that verse. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven. And so that's what we talked about last week, that from this place of the present moment, that's where we visualize. So there are lots of practices we can use to get into the present moment, which I talked about in that sermon. And then I talked about it again last week in See Something Better. There are ways to get us to that space so that then we're looking and rising up in consciousness and receiving sight, seeing life as it can be, not as it appears to be, right? Seeing the finished work, right? Seeing it done, right? If you're, it's Healing Sunday today, right? So seeing yourself doing all of the things that you may currently be unable to do, seeing you getting out of bed where you previously could not get out of bed, seeing you walking where you previously couldn't walk, seeing you running where you previously couldn't run, right? Seeing you taking in certain activities that you weren't able to take before, seeing you going places where you weren't previously able to go. And so in this context of this miracle story, the looked up to heaven, Jesus in his very own mind saw all of the people fed and satiated. So much so that there was more than enough and folks could take food home with them. But then the next part, and it's just 2 words, because it says, he looked up to heaven and blessed. Again, I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version. He looked up to heaven and blessed. Now, as I said last week, we could dismiss this whole thing. He looked up to heaven and blessed and just say, oh yeah, Jesus was saying the blessing. He was blessing the food because that's what we do. Before serving the food, we acknowledge God, we say thank you, we bless the food, we do that. But that's far from what is taking place here, y'all. And I think where we can start to understand more of what's really taking place is to look at another translation. The English Standard Version brings us a little closer to what was happening. He looked up to heaven and said a blessing, or he spoke a blessing. And so this is very important because, one, I would love, and the text doesn't give us this, but in some ways it's a good thing as well, but I would love if we actually had the blessing, right? You know that the disciples asked Jesus, teach us how to pray, right? And he said, pray like this. And that's where we get what we call today the Lord's Prayer. Now, unfortunately, then that's become codified as this sort of religious prayer that is somehow the most powerful prayer that one could pray. But Jesus said, pray like this. He was demonstrating a formula. We also know that that prayer actually wasn't brand new, but it was the way in which he spoke the words and the order in which he was presenting the ideas. He was teaching the power of prayer and really affirmative prayer. So in some ways, it's good that we don't get the actual words, but I also think that if we were given the words, then the looked up to heaven and blessed wouldn't be dismissed as just saying grace. He looked up to heaven and said a blessing or spoke a blessing. And so that word that's simply translated as blessed or said a blessing or spoke a blessing is a Greek word. And that Greek word is eulogio. Eulogio is the word that is the root of our English word eulogy. I could go on and on about that. Most of the eulogies that we experience in our lives are not eulogies for this reason, because a eulogy should be a blessing. A eulogy should be speaking well of, because that's the root of the word. And so we look at that, the definition of eulogio: to bless, to praise, to speak well of, to prosper, to confer prosperity upon. And that's what blessing really is. So again, this is why I say when we go back to Genesis 1 and we read that 7-day formula and God saw it was good, it's not that God was seeing the goodness reflected back to him in the way that a painter or an artist would admire their work. He was conferring prosperity upon it. He was calling it good. He was calling it blessed because of that which he saw in his own mind. And so here in the 12 Conditions of a Miracle, Todd Michael writes it this way: in essence, the blessing of the bread was a careful continuation of the 7th condition, visualizing. Jesus elevated his vision, seeing the crowd happy and well fed. He then brought the positive thought form to a more concrete level by putting his thoughts into words. As everyone listened, he spoke highly of the bread. Lord have mercy, this is so powerful. I hope y'all are getting this. I trust you are getting it. The essence of his blessing was this. And so this is Todd Michael using his spiritual imagination, because we don't get what the blessing was, but you can use your spiritual imagination to understand what had to have been said in the presence of the people. This supply is perfect. It is abundant in quantity, exquisite in quality, and very generously supplied. How grateful we are to receive such a gift. So he blessed his vision. Lord have mercy. Oh, Lord have mercy. Let there be, and it was so. It was already so in his own mind. But in order to bring it into concrete form, I love how Todd Michael writes that. Then he brought the positive thought form, the vision, to a more concrete level by putting his thoughts to words. And then I love everyone listened. He spoke highly of the bread. This is the powerful part of the demonstration, and this is the powerful part of affirmative prayer and a spiritual mind treatment when the word is spoken audibly, right? Everyone is hearing this affirmation of the vision, which is that we have blessed and called good. In this case, that Jesus is blessed and called good. This supply is perfect. It is abundant in quantity, exquisite in quality, and very generously supplied. How grateful we are to receive such a gift. So do you see what's happening here? He saw that it was good. Affirmation time. There is a blessing in my blessing. There is a blessing in my blessing. There is a blessing in my blessing. The blessing, the miracle, your desired outcome requires your blessing. And then Todd Michael goes on, he writes, he says, the mindset that underlies this process is gratitude. And so then the practice of the eighth condition, this mindset is actually developed in your day to day. Yes, there's a formula here. Yes, we are working a miracle. And if you are working a miracle, you must audibly bless your vision, just as Jesus, the embodiment of truth in the story, did. But in your day to day, you must practice the power of your blessing, the power of your gratitude. One, you must bless your resources, all of them, all the time. Are we talking about money and gifts? Sure. But also, as Todd Michael writes, we're also talking about your health, your friends, your job, your house, your country, your life, and everything else you have been given. If you're not practicing blessing right here and right now, and if you're not practicing the affirmative use of your words and calling things good, it's going to be very difficult to do that when you're deliberately trying to create or co-create something. And I want to say this now, this is important, because while it's akin, it's not the same thing. So you all know, and I know many of you love the song that I wrote, I Bless It, right? Which is really about challenges. When I have a problem, I don't worry, because I know where my help comes from. I surrender and I let go, because the battle belongs to God. I bless it. I bless it. And so that's about this faculty that we have to not get swayed by what our eyes show us, but to recognize and know that even that which seems unwanted can and will be turned into good. And so I bless it now, right? That we operate in the consciousness of the Joseph story, right? What some meant for evil, God used it for good. We recognize through our own lived life, we've had enough experiences where we can watch an unwanted thing actually lead us to the wanted, where we can watch a closed door lead us to an opening that we didn't expect, right? We recognize that, and so we bless the unwanted. But that's not what this is. This is not about blessing the unwanted. This is about practicing blessing all that's in your life consciously. So your resources, all of them, this is wanted: your health, your friends, your job, your house, your country, your life, and everything else that you've been given. Also, then we must, from this place, learn to see life with childlike wonder. Todd Michael writes this. He says, the shift to wonderment is the door that opens into the higher dimension. This alone, when executed perfectly, will enable you to pass into a new world in which dreams and reality merge effortlessly and naturally in a river of lavish abundance. Ooh, there's lavish abundance. Love that. Catherine Ponder, love that. We heard that in the affirmation today as I shared the healing the healing praise report, right? Lavish abundance. And what I love about this idea of wonderment, this also takes us into a better understanding of when we read Genesis 1 and we read, and God saw it was good, what God really saw. Because the word that is translated there, it really means beautiful, right? And God saw it beautiful. Right. And God's was filled with wonder. What's interesting about the way that Hebrew word works, it depends on what the object is. So it can be used if you see something, right? And most of the time, all the time in English, it's just translated as good, right? See it good, or it felt good, or it tasted good, right? So depending on the senses. So when we think of saw it good, right? Saw it beautiful, saw it wonderful, saw it brilliant, saw it dazzling, right? And so this is what is moving us into this space of childlike wonder. It's not a leap to say that then God looked upon it with wonder. And so that is absolutely the space and place that you must learn to operate in your daily life. And then especially when you're in that moment, as you can then bless that which you see in your mind in the same way that the spiritual imagination of Todd Michael affirms, this supply is perfect. It is abundant in quantity, exquisite in quality, and very generously supplied. How grateful we are to receive this gift, to receive such a gift. So again, bless your resources, all of them, all the time. Learn to see life with childlike wonder. Speak well of your dream. Speak well of your heaven, the vision that you see within your own mind. This, of course, is the power back of the daily use of affirmations. You must speak the word. You must speak your affirmations. If you were part of the masterclass this summer, if you haven't watched it, you can always go back and watch it. It's available on YouTube. But if you were part of the masterclass, Open Your Mind to Prosperity, this is what we were doing all summer, right? Is gathering affirmations and then making use of them, speaking them. Bless it because why? There is a blessing in your blessing. This is where we understand that we have power. It's not that it's a blessing because it's good. It's a blessing because you have blessed it. Now also, and I know I'm about to get in somebody's business, we must watch our words. We must be mindful of the words that we speak and then the conversations that we engage in. So gossip and complaining, all of that stuff, we have to be mindful of that. Now, this is not a moral or religious suggestion. That's not what this is about, right? It's a recognition that you have power, that you are a powerful being. And the things that you say impact and affect your life, right? So this is a word of warning for you, not because it's a religious or moral thing, right? It's a recognition of the power of your word. As the great Stan Lee wrote, with great power comes great responsibility. Yes, yes. So the truth is you can't be excited over here about using affirmations and acknowledging the power of your word and what you're going to create and co-create. And I'm naming this and I'm naming that and I'm naming my good and I'm affirming this and I'm affirming that, while also being over here and thinking that your word also doesn't have the power to miscreate. Like I said, I know I'm in somebody's business right now. And so it's incredibly important that you're mindful of your words. Now, this takes practice. You may want to try the complaint-free challenge. I was seeing it as we were watching the videos. We were singing There's a Healing Going On. I had my purple bracelet on in that video from the complaint-free challenge. You can go to complaintfreeworld.org. Will Bowen has created a wonderful practice around that and understand the ways in which we use complaints. One of the first things that most humans do, a lot of times complaints are used as a way to connect. But there are a zillion other ways to connect with people, right? Zillions of other affirmative and constructive ways to connect with people. But a lot of times, unconsciously, that's what people are doing. And so when you realize, oh, I was really just trying to connect, well, you can find other ways to connect, and then you're not complaining, and then you're not miscreating and misusing the power of your word. Also, Will Bowen reminds us about criticism and hypercriticism, which falls under here as well. Most of the time, you can keep your opinion to yourself. And there's an opportunity in that moment to also train yourself to look for and see good where you were previously unaware of it. Right? So you may see something, and this is so funny. This is coming to me right now. We went out to dinner with family yesterday, and the waitress wanted, my aunt's birthday was a few days ago, and so we were gathering for her birthday and just to be together. And the waitress asked us, do you want me to sing? Now, we don't know if she could sing or not, right? But long story short, she brings the cake and she starts singing Happy Birthday, and she sang it in about 3 or 4 or 5 different keys. It was not good, right? Now, while I acknowledge that, and of course, being a musician, right? Of course, I hear that and I acknowledge that. But the thing that I put my mind on in this context, and what makes me smile and really brings me joy, there was something within her that really wanted to celebrate my aunt. There was something so genuine and intentional within her that wanted to celebrate her and celebrate in that moment. And that's what we all felt. That's the energy that came through, even in her off-key happy birthday, right? So yes, that was true. It was off-key. But I can put the focus of my mind and see good where I may have been previously unaware of it. And real talk, there's a Greg Stamper in the past that would have only seen and only talked about her being off key and probably been annoyed and offended that she was singing off key for my aunt's birthday, right? So I'm demonstrating also that this is an evolution within myself. Like, I know a time in my life that I would not have seen it that way, and I would not tell the story in that way. Right? So this is something that we get to do. And again, none of this is about morality. This is not a moral or religious suggestion. This is a recognition of the power of your word. Also, then be mindful of how you speak about your future. I could preach a whole sermon on this right now, but I'm seeing so many people affirming what they don't want related to the coming months and to 2026. Yes, I know what this administration is doing. Yes, I know the things that are happening, but I also understand that individually and collectively, the power of our word matters. And there are so many people that are speaking about a future they don't want, matter of factly. And so while you can't control what people think, say, and do, you have absolute power and control over what you think, say, and do. Be mindful of how you speak about the future. Be mindful of the songs that you sing along to. Most music out here is very affirmational, but it ain't truth. I want you to hear that again. Most of the music, particularly a lot of the popular music today, it is very affirmational, but it ain't truth. Right. And I see people using certain songs by certain artists. I'm not going to name names, and have literally, there's this whole social media trend of like my affirmations. And they're affirming things that it's of what you want and what you don't want, what I'm not and what I am and what this person is. And if you say this about me, then you must be so-and-so. It's affirmational, but it ain't truth. And so ultimately, it will create what you don't want. So be mindful of what you sing along to. I'm reminded of Emma Curtis Hopkins. She writes about, she was talking about poets. She was like, it may be good poetry, but it ain't truth. There's a lot of music. It sounds good. Listen to it if you want, but just know that it ain't truth. In closing, let's review. The 8th condition is gratitude. Gratitude is actually the mindset behind the power of your blessing. There is a blessing in your blessing. Your blessing is actually an activating energy. After you see it good in your mind, speak it good with your mouth. Affirmation time. There is a blessing in my blessing. There is a blessing in my blessing. There is a blessing in my blessing. You practice this condition and develop this spiritual faculty on a day-to-day basis. So guard your tongue. Speak well of everyone and everything directly in your life, your money, your bank and bank accounts, your health, your friends, your family, your home, your job, your city, yes, even your political leaders, and on and on. Minimize gossip and complaints. Minimize criticism and hypercriticism. Speak well of your future. And hear this. I said I might be in somebody's business, and so it's important that we tell the whole story. The goal is not perfection. You're human, and you will do all of these things at one time, right? You will miscreate by affirming a future you don't want. You will gossip or complain from time to time, right? You will engage in criticism or hypercriticism. The goal, however, is to push the balance of your words in the direction of that which is good, beneficial, constructive, life-giving, life-supporting, healing, and beneficial. And so by being intentional day to day, day by day rather, being intentional, understanding that there's a blessing in your blessing, understanding the power of your words, understanding the ways in which you've miscreated in the past, you're less willing to do that. And when you do, you simply forgive yourself, set yourself free, and move on, because you know there's a natural and automatic reset at that moment of your awareness, and this now moment creates the next moment. And so just as this is true with the balance of your thought, take stock of your words. Reflect at the end of each day. Reflect, there's a blessing in my blessing. What did I energize with my words today? There is a blessing in my blessing. What did I amplify with my words today? There is a blessing in my blessing. What did I celebrate with my words today? There is a blessing in my blessing. What did I magnify with my words today? Day by day, you will get better and better at speaking the good or simply hushing your mouth because you are choosing as much as possible to only use your words to bless, to heal, and make things beautiful. That's actually one of the best tips in the world, and we all know it, right? If you ain't got nothing good to say, just hush your mouth. And understanding the power, you are more than willing to do that very thing. There is a blessing in your blessing. For this truth, I am so very grateful. And to this, now I say, amen, ashe, and so it is.